people skills, which is the orange icon with the little people in it, you can see right there, is a key aspect, is a key skill in living one's life, uh, achieving success, engaging with other people, getting things done, just the practicalities of daily living, also the pursuit of goals. If we can't work with other people, if we can't work with other people in a healthy way, to be more specific about it, well, it's unlikely that we're going to get where we want to go. Now, we were talking about yesterday. Uh, Today is what day is it in the process? We're on day 12. I should remember that. So yesterday, day 11, was talking about, or at least I hinted towards, this kind of this style of leadership that bangs on the table and insists that you and I do what we should do. It doesn't work. It creates fear, anxiety, stifles creativity, and so on. Mentioned that yesterday. Today, we're still on the topic of people skills and wanted to talk more specifically about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, very broadly speaking, or simply put, is the ability to recognize your emotional state, um, recognize the emotions in others, and navigate that successfully to achieve healthy ends for you and other people and so on. So it's a social skill. It's the ability to read the room, so to speak. Now, this idea, emotional intelligence, became quite popular in the 90s with the work of Daniel Goleman and his book of the same name, Emotional Intelligence. The Harvard Business Review got a hold of the idea, published an article by Daniel Goleman, and all of a sudden this topic just flourished. It exploded in the world of business and management and so on. So executives everywhere were wondering, how do I become more emotionally intelligent? How do I do what I need to do to a more refined degree, successful degree, and so on? And so how it goes with most things that become widely popular is they tend to lose the nuance. The concept itself tends to become oversimplified, and people want shortcuts because in the business world, it's all about profit. It's all about achieving objective ends. And that's fine. However, oftentimes, and we know when we look at capitalist systems, which is pretty much everybody in the world, we work inside a capitalist system, top down hierarchical structure. The bosses at the top, and they're usually blokes, these bosses at the top want results. And so they'll do what they can to achieve those results. And if emotional intelligence is just something else they need to do, well, then they'll do it. They'll take a course, they'll tick the box, and they go, lo and behold, I'm now emotionally intelligent. And oftentimes it's shorthand or a euphemism for how do I manipulate this situation to get what I want. And that's the problem with it. It's the problem with all good ideas that become over popularized. And so, respectful and all, as the work of Daniel Goleman and Salovey and Mayer, who came before him, and others who've done work on emotional intelligence and formulated it in frameworks and concepts and so on. It may have merit, their ideas may have merit, but it becomes lost in the pursuit of an end. And so I often wonder to myself, is it possible for somebody to become more emotionally intelligent? And again, referring back to the session published yesterday, day 11, and the work of Jim Collins. His book again is Good to Great. Have it here. Get your hands on it. It's a good read. Loads of research in there that he did, and him and his team did on leadership. He found, again, shorthand, that those who maintain successful output over the long term are rooted in something more important. They're rooted in an idea of themselves and a philosophy and a way of living and a way of being that transcends objective ends. And so it has the tendency to last. And so here we have a problem with emotional intelligence, is that it's been overused, worn out, and a little bit oversimplified. Think about the CEO who puts on a smile, and you know that the smile is disingenuous, and they pretend to listen, and they nod at you, and they take notes, and they say, "Thanks for your feedback. That was really great," and then they do nothing about it. So they put on a good show, and all the while, their other core motivations, their real self, is operational in the background, and they put up this facade, this surface level acting. And Goldman has been criticized for this because Ari Hochschild, if I have her name correct, wrote a book in the early 2000s, perhaps, called The Managed Heart. I have it there somewhere. If you haven't heard of it, go and look it up. You'll find a lot of articles online. So she wrote about and criticized emotional intelligence as a means by which organizations go about manipulating staff. So imagine you worked in retail. Maybe you don't have to imagine it. Maybe you do. And consider the game that staff need to play in order to keep disgruntled customers satisfied. So the customer is always right. Now, I know some businesses don't operate this way. And you can apply this to a team environment as well, in sport or any environment where people come together to achieve a goal. So those staff are required to put on a face and to just smile in the face of abuse, perhaps even on a daily basis. And Ari Hochschild looked at workers in the area of debt collection and also airline stewards, or air hostesses as they used to be referred to, and the abuse that these people would undergo, the difficult work of a tax collector or a debt collector, and the means by which they need to switch off their humanity almost to engage in the work. And also those who work on airlines, again, being manhandled by fat, sweaty CEOs on junkets to the Bahamas or wherever it is they're going, and they have to just smile and put up with it. Now, maybe that's not necessarily the case everywhere and all the time, but the point is that emotional intelligence is often used as a euphemism or shorthand for don't be a human being, don't be affected by this situation, just get on with your work, be a robot, get it done. As a bit of a sidebar to that, you can look at the advancing artificial intelligence, generative AI, and so forth, that occupies so much of the commentary in around the business world these days and elsewhere. And the motivation that organizations have to make this work, to make this operational. It's not to make your life easier, by the way. It's to replace you. If you didn't know that already, that's what it's about. It's to replace human beings with robots that can do the work so they won't have to pay you, right? Because robots don't need rights and so forth. Anyway, that's just a side note. The point is, emotional intelligence is oftentimes used as a tool of manipulation. And Goldman has been criticized for that, and others. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand one's emotional state, to regulate one's emotions in a difficult situation in order to see it out. And sometimes we find ourselves in those situations, especially when we're pursuing goals, when stakes are high and we have to maintain composure. Composure is a critical faculty that you and I need in the sporting world, in the business world, when things get tough and the heat is on. Losing the plot and roaring and shouting and banging on the table doesn't help anybody. People don't make mistakes on purpose. You certainly don't make mistakes on purpose unless you're completely driven to the pit of hell in your job and driven to sabotage the work of everybody else. And that's actually a facet of negative workplace behaviors. I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's a consequence of a shitty work environment, right? Anyway, where was I? So, emotional intelligence. Yes. So nobody makes mistakes on purpose. We're all trying to do our best. And so in a high stakes, highly pressured situation, you got to know and learn and know about yourself and know when to switch it on and switch it off. Surgeons have mastered themselves to such a degree that they can manage highly tense situations where they're holding the life of a patient in their hands, right? It's a prime example of people who are capable of managing their own emotional state, being able to read the room, being able to take account of other people's situation, despite what they may say. So other people mightn't necessarily want you to know how they feel because maybe they've been trained through life experience or work experience not to speak up. And so they don't tell you how they feel, but you can read the room and you can make a decision. If you're around a boardroom table and there's 10 or 12 other executives and you're looking to make an important decision, having these skills is really important because being the CEO, everybody else may be inclined, as by way of example, to agree with you, but being clued in, being able to read the room properly, being able to read between the lines, being able to read people's emotional states allows you see the problems that may exist and respond accordingly. In a sporting situation, being the coach requires you to have a highly refined degree of emotional intelligence, of social intelligence, because otherwise, how do you read your players? How do you know what players are ready and what players are not ready? It's the same goes for, let's say, again in that sporting situation, um, the captain of the team. Last 5 minutes of a game, you need to hold yourself together to get through. So you see, emotional intelligence is really important. However, it can't be fabricated. Some would argue, the work of Mayer and Savoli, uh, Salovi rather, uh, suggests that emotional intelligence is somewhat cognitive. It's an intelligence insofar as the same as your IQ is a measure of your intelligence. Emotional intelligence can be measured in a similar way. Now they've been criticised because um, critics argue that it's not an aspect of cognitive ability, although there is a component of cognition involved, in other words, thinking. But you know, if you're angry, there's no amount of thinking is going to get you off that angry level. Or if you're upset, there's no amount of rationality is going to make you not upset. It takes time. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't rationalize with yourself and take yourself down off the edge, so to speak. But it does mean that it uh, your degree of emotional intelligence seems to be a component of, or the result of living a life in a particular way and having certain experiences that have taught you, hang on a minute, this doesn't work. So messing up, making the wrong call, losing your temper with somebody when you know you shouldn't. If any of you folks watching this have kids, for example, if you're like me, you have some regrets about how you treated and responded to your little people, because now that you're a little bit older, you understand that they have no control over their emotional state. You're the adult. You're the one that has to have the degree of control. But you can't decide that. You can't say, okay, I'm controlled now. It requires you to have had some experience of getting it wrong in order to get it right. Do you understand what I'm saying? So emotional intelligence to me, despite, the psychological frameworks and the theories that exist, Goleman is one, Salovey and Mayer is another. There's many of them. Baron 1997 is another. And they're listed in the article below. If you just hit the link, or maybe you're on Substack watching this, if you are, great. There are these theories and concepts around it, but at a very basic level, being able to engage with other people successfully, get the best out of people, get the best out of those who are asked to perform on your behalf, requires you to have had certain life experience, to have got it wrong, and now to know how to respond in an effective way. So, emotional intelligence is not something you can learn, like learning to change the tire on a car. It's something that must occur of its own accord as a consequence of living a life. And that's my interpretation of it. And I think that's accurate. You can't pretend. You can pretend for a while, but the real you, the one that wants to respond on impulse, is waiting in the background, waiting to explode, or waiting to break down and cry. You're holding it together, for a short period, but you can't for so long. So all this surface level acting that we use to try and mask how we truly feel is a waste of time. And ultimately, we have to learn important lessons. Now, when we talk about mental skills, it's not, they're not, and I said this at the very outset, these aren't things that you just flick on and off, that you simply learn like you learn the content of an essay. They are they are they are skills that develop in you as a consequence of living a life. And a part of that is reading about this stuff and knowing what the research says and knowing about your own experience and being able to combine the two into something that you can use. So knowledge is important. Experience in this regard is also equally important. Emotional intelligence, some of these models I break down in the article today. Goleman's, for example, Daniel Goleman is probably one of the more famous psychologists who've formulated this idea. He suggests that emotional intelligence is comprised of four major competencies, one of which is self-awareness, the ability to accurately perceive your own emotional states and so on, being able to be aware of them and regulate them, and know the situations that bring them up, right? Self-management, the ability to regulate your own emotional state. Social awareness, there's other people in the room here. My behavior matters. Maybe I just have to put a lid on this for a minute, being able to regulate that. We know through cognitive behavioral therapies, meditation and mindfulness and so on, that breathing techniques help regulate your emotional state. So if you're feeling stressed, that's how you apply these skills. We're going to get into that a little bit more later on, because ultimately we're going to the point where I'm giving you a framework for actually practicing this stuff. I know we're doing this over 30 days and it might seem like a lot of information, but this is all coming down to a particular daily practice that if you execute, this stuff just happens by itself. At least that's what I believe. Social awareness, Goleman talks about, and then relationship management, working with other people. It's all very kind of clinical, isn't it? It's all a bit kind of clunky, but really what we're talking about is knowing yourself, knowing other people, being able to work with other people in a healthy way and produce results that are good for everybody. Read more about emotional intelligence in the article below. The link is there. And do yourself a favor and get with it. Remember, though, it's not something that you simply learn and apply. You must be prepared to ask yourself the hard questions and to recognize, when you make mistakes or when you've got it wrong, and apologize, right, and be sincere about it. Be able to connect with yourself and be able to connect successfully with others. That's what emotional intelligence is. Okay, this is day 12, as I said, and tomorrow we're going to talk about personality. Incidentally, Goleman's model talks about emotional intelligence as being an aspect of personality. So how do you change who you are? Well, you can't. Maybe who you are changes as a consequence. But tomorrow we're going to talk about personality and its role in success and working with other people. We're going to use the Big Five. It's a popular framework for understanding personality, although it's not the only one. And it's not the end of the story either. But stay tuned tomorrow for that. I realise this is coming to you a bit late, but we're still the right side of midnight, especially where I am. So hopefully you found this session helpful. Post a comment, share the thing, let me know you're here, and I'd be very grateful. Okay, see you later.